And then I'll just review what we have. I have my paints on a plate. I have blue, yellow, red, black, and white. I'm going to show you how to mix the colors in this painting. I'm not working from little plastic containers of paint, so I need an extra plate to do my mixing. So you can leave your containers in your paint in the containers and use your plate for mixing, or just put out a little bit of paint at a time and then use a separate part for mixing. All right, I also have a canvas. My canvas is larger than yours, so that you can see it. And I have brushes. My brushes are slightly different than yours. They're bigger than yours, but the same kind of variety, basically. And I also have napkins. I have a container with water in it. In your kit, it was just a little container. And I have my beverage. And so I'm starting out with water, and I'm going to turn this into wine at some point and start drinking that somehow, magically. All right. And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to give instructions one step at a time. And while I'm giving the instructions, I ask that you mute yourself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to record this on Zoom so that I can send the link to the organizer tomorrow. And then she can send it to everybody in case you need to go back and tweak anything, or if someone missed the call and, you know, or if life happened halfway through and you stopped, so you can review the link another day. But I'm also going to make another copy, and I'm going to edit that down to just the instructions and put it on YouTube. So in other words, I am going to be recording this, and part of it will be used for YouTube, the instruction part. So if you have any personal conversations, just kind of keep that in mind, that I will edit them out, but yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. And yeah, so I think that's it. So if you would right now, if you would mute yourselves, I'm going to get started and show you, we're going to start with the background, okay? Awesome. Liz, you're awesome. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to start with a big brush, your biggest brush, and I'm just going to dip it in water, and I'm going to paint the canvas with just plain old water. Just plain old water. And I'm doing that because Denver is very dry, and the humidity helps move the paint around a bit. Acrylic paint dries in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's really quick. And for that reason, it makes a good medium for beginning painters. But it will dry quickly and it will stain. So if you get any on your clothes, this is what you should do. If you get any on your clothes, pick up a clean napkin, blot it off, like pull it off, don't rub it in, and then rub dish soap into it, and then put it in the sorry, not in the dishwasher, in the washing machine as soon as you can, with the warmest water the garment will allow, and then say a prayer, because it still might not come out, but that's the best way to try. And if you get it on your cat or your carpet, same thing, except don't put your cat in the washer, okay? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, oh, one more thing I want to tell you about this painting. This is a very loose painting. And what I mean by that is it's very impressionistic. You'll see that this is really sloppy. So this technique, this really sloppy, messy, look at how nondescript these trees are. This is hard for people who are detail oriented. So you guys picked a little bit of a challenge given who you are. It's challenging for me for that reason too. Just remember, keep it loose. And I like to joke that it's the opposite advice my parents gave me when I went away to college. I tell people when you're painting an impressionistic painting, keep it fast and loose. That's exactly opposite what my parents told me when I went away to college. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is what's called an underpainting, and we're going to mix. I'm going to take a big brush. I'm going to mix a little red with a little yellow, And here I'm cheating by just going right between the two. And it's going to take more yellow than it will red, because red is a more powerful pigment than yellow. So once I get some orange on there, and I don't have to mix it completely perfectly, I'm going to put that in the center part of my painting, and I'm going to be messy. I started to tell you that it's hard for people who are detail oriented sometimes to do impressionistic paintings because they're messy. So be fast and loose. And then here's another thing. Those of us who are detail oriented, we tend to hold our brushes like a pencil. So I'll need you to pull back on it and go right back here like you're conducting an orchestra. And that's going to help you remember to keep your painting fast and loose, okay? Yeah. So I'm going to put some in here for the sunset. Then there's also a little bit down here. And look at how, oh my gosh, this is not mixed well. Talk about fast and loose. That's crazy. Another way to help you be fast and loose with this underpainting, just have a glass of wine or two. If you have one glass of wine, it's going to help you relax. If you have 2 glasses of wine, you're going to think you're Michelangelo. If you have 3 glasses of wine, well, you'll just have to drop off your painting and I'll finish it and pick it up later. Okay, so look at the general areas where I put this orange. And I can still even see some underneath the blue there. Crazy. Kind of crazy. Not sure why they did it this way. Just a challenge us, I guess. All right. So notice that there's some is more red, some is more yellow. I'm being very messy with this. Fast and loose. I'm going all the way to the edge, and I'm even going to wrap it around the side of my canvas a bit. And I'm going to leave this here so you can see where I put the orange, okay? A little bit over here too. And then I'm going to stop painting. I'm going to give you time to make sure yours is in approximately this area. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, these orange spots are kind of like reflected light. And so if you don't have them in exactly the same spots, it doesn't really matter. We're going to be covering up most of it with blue anyway. All right, so orange scribbles. When I clean my brushes, I always let the water do the work. I swish the dickens out of them. And then if you swish them a ton, I always tell the kids, when little kids come in here, I tell them to say their ABCs while they're cleaning their brushes. Then you just have to use your napkin to check it, and you don't use a half a tree that way. But just want to tell you how we know when this is dry. There's a few ways. There's 3 ways. One, when it's wet, it'll still be shiny. You can see that there's some shine on it. When you shine a light on it, there's shiny patches. So if it's shiny, it's still dry. Sorry, it's still wet, I mean, still wet. The other way is if you touch your sofa or a piece of fabric in your room, and then you touch the canvas on the back, if the canvas feels cooler to the touch on the back, that means that this is still wet. The third way is you pick it up and you rub it on the person next to you, but I don't recommend that way at all. So we're just going to let this dry another minute or 2, and then I'll show you the sky. But if yours is still very, very wet, so there's 3 ways you can dry it. 1, a hair dryer, if you have one handy. 2, a fan. We have fans and hair dryers here. A third way, which is even easier, is just to pick it up and wave it around. So if you want to do that to speed up your drying time, that would be awesome. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to just get your painting dry. In general, you don't want to mix orange and blue unless you're going for brown, because they're complementary colors, meaning when you mix them, you get brown. And if it's a dark blue and a dark orange, you'd even get black, possibly. So that's why we want to make sure this is nice and dry. Normally, in lots of other paintings that we do, when we do a sunset, we'll go from yellow to orange to red. And then when you mix the blue and the red up here, it's purple, and that's okay. But in this one, we want it good and dry because the orange is kind of all over. So mine is dry. Yours might not be yet. It's still a little bit cool to the touch. Oh, so is that one. So mine's dry. I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step, but if yours is not dry, just keep waving it around and wait, okay? But you can watch, okay? We're going to make a very messy blue sky over this orange, but we're going to let the orange peek out in spots. And to do that, I'm going to take the biggest flat brush I have and put blue paint on one side. And then I'm going to go into the side of my white. I never go into the center because I want to save some of each color paint that's still clean. I have blue and I have white, some on each side. And then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to scribble. Now, if my painting is still wet, it'll start to be brown. So I have to be careful. I'm going to go easy. I'm going to go easy. I'm going to go on the white spots first. And I'm going to notice how messy I'm being with this, scribbling in the blue and the white. Now, detailed-oriented people tend to blend. We want to avoid blending our colors. We want the blue and the white to coexist peacefully, but we don't want to mix them. We don't want just sky blue. That's why I put some on each side so that I can definitely keep some blue and some white. I'm being very careful to make sure I don't have any, that this isn't wet. If you have any doubt, keep waving it around. And then I'm putting on more blue and more white in like little patches, little scribbles. You can see how messy this is. See how messy that is? Very impressionistic. We used to have a teacher here. She worked for us for 5 years. Hopefully after the pandemic, she'll come back. I don't know. But boy, these loose paintings used to drive her crazy. She's very detail oriented. Really, really talented, wonderful teacher, but had a different style. This teacher has a very loose style, the one who painted this original. So I'm being very careful, just making sure that wherever I put this messy stuff on, that I'm not covering all of the orange. I'm letting some peek out. And then I'm not covering anything wet. It is so hard to make a sky that's not uniform if you are a detailed-oriented person, but it's going to look great when we're done. It's just not going to be realistic. It's going to be more impressionistic. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how many of you have seen a real Van Gogh up close. I'm also going to stop it right about there because I want a little Bronco sunset. Somebody was talking about a Bronco sunset, and that's exactly what we have here behind these mountains. So you can just kind of let that blue just kind of taper off so that it leaves a Bronco sunset. So someone was talking about, I forgot. Anyway, So if you've ever seen a Van Gogh or a Monet up close, if you've ever been fortunate enough to go to Paris and seen the museums where there's so much of the impressionistic work there, or even just in town here at the Denver Museum, Art Museum, they had a Monet exhibit. But anyway, if you've ever seen one of those up close, what you'll find is that they look really messy up close. The proper viewing, I'm just kind of tapping it to blend it a little, but I don't want to make it all sky blue. I'm deliberately leaving separate clumps of blue and a little bit of white, and I'm going to stop before I make it all just one sky blue. There's a fine line that I'm trying to meet. But anyway, so if you've ever seen a Van Gogh or a Picasso or not Picasso, a Monet up close, they're very messy, very messy. And they look terrible up close. Honestly, they look terrible. And I was really fortunate, my husband and I, for our bucket list, we had going to Paris. So when our youngest son graduated from college, we decided to fulfill that dream. And last year we went to France, and I went to all those museums that I'd only read about. And we saw Van Goghs and Monets up close. We went to Monet's garden, and they look absolutely terrible up close, just terrible. But then when you step back about 10 to 15 feet away, oh my goodness, they knock your socks off. So that's what we're going for here. Up close, this looks terrible, and I know it. But 10 to 15 feet away, it's going to be awesome. Whatever you put down here, make it really light, and just so it kind of tapers off into the sunset. I don't want any hard lines here. I'm barely touching the canvas. 2 hairs and some air, like Bob Ross used to say, 2 hairs and some air. All right. So I'm going to let you catch up with that. So you can go ahead and unmute yourselves again and visit while you get that far. Now, keep in mind, keep some sunset here so that it goes behind our mountains. Okay? So you can go ahead and unmute. And while you're doing that, I'm going to show you up close. Look at how messy that is. Crazy messy. And there's little bits of orange coming through. Oh, and I also painted the sides and the top. So that way, that's called a gallery wrap. And if you do that, you won't have to put it in a frame. The canvas becomes your frame. So feel free to unmute and visit. And don't forget to clean your brushes. I did put my orange a little lower than I did, than this one is, but I mean my blue, you could put it a little higher if you want. I could let that dry and I could go back over and paint white and then orange on top of it again if I really wanted it exactly the same, but it's okay. This particular painting had a little blob of dark blue here, but it really was, but then it also has some here. So this painting kind of breaks all the rules. And, but normally I'm a certified Bob Ross teacher, and this is not a Bob Ross painting, obviously. This is acrylic. Bob Ross is oil. But if I were painting in Bob Ross's style, he always makes the sides and the corners darker. Because it brings your eye in towards the center. So I would normally do that. I would normally put more blue in the upper corners. But I also have to keep in mind that this was not my original painting. And this is the style you signed up for. And, you know, every artist is different and every painting is unique. So do you, you know, do you. But whatever you do, I wouldn't blend it all in unless you want it to look different than this painting, which is fine. So let me tell you a little bit about that. So every artist has a style, and we frequently don't know our styles until we paint it a lot. And then we really start to observe what our tendencies are. My tendency is to go big, go bold, or go home. So you'll have your own style, and we'll see at the end what your style is. But I wanted to tell you a quick little story about Bob Ross. So in getting Bob Ross certified, I have to go down to New Smyrna Beach periodically and and just paint down there and hang out with the Bob Ross instructors and learn new tips. I usually go down once a year for a week and paint with them. And so Bob grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, and he has a studio in New Smyrna Beach. And he died in 1995, but before he died, he taught his son how to paint, he taught his friends how to paint, and then they taught people, and then those people taught people. So the certification process eventually included about 2,000 instructors over the course of the last 25 years. I'm one of them. A lot of folks have already retired, so there's not very many of us in Colorado. But anyway, when you go down to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, to Bob's studio, you can see all three of the paintings that he did for each show. He would do one before the show, and he'd show it to the producer, and he would tell the producer, this is what I want to paint. And then a half hour before the show, he would go in and paint another one quickly. And then during the show, he'd paint a third copy of the exact same thing. But each one, when you see them lined up, each one is different. And basically what that tells me is you're a different artist every time you paint. So even if you're painting the exact same composition, you know how much sleep you had, what's on your mind, the mood you're in, maybe what you had for lunch. All of these things go into how we feel when we paint, and that affects how we paint. So even Bob Ross would paint the same thing 3 times and they would all look different. So the bottom line is there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's just your style, and everyone has their own unique style. So hopefully you'll embrace that today and learn about yourself, learn about your own style as you paint. You can imagine after people in Europe only saw realistic paintings for hundreds of years, when the Impressionists came and they started painting like this, the art critics probably had a conniption fit. And Monet was criticized in the papers of the time, saying that all he did was paint underpaintings, which is what we did first, right? And he said, no, you don't understand. I'm not painting mountains and a sky and flowers and trees. I'm painting your memory of what you saw after you look away. I mixed together a little red and a little blue to make purple, and it's a dark purple because I didn't add any white yet, but it's red and blue, and I made a purple. And then I'm going to, with my dirty brush, I'm gonna make a separate pile of the same color just with white. So this is just red and purple, and this is the same thing with some white. Now, in general, I have a little problem with this painting, but I have to, you know, I'm a thinker, right? I want to analyze it, and I want to make it realistic and all that, and I have to tell myself that's not what the original artist did. But in general, when things are farther away, they're lighter in color and they're bluer in general. So that's if you are somebody who really likes things look actual, so, or realistic. So if you want yours to look a little more realistic in the background, the back ones should be a little lighter in color, a little more white, and a little more blue. And then that's how your eyes perceive things that are far away. Lighter in color and bluer. And then your eyes see things that are closer up, darker, with more red or yellow in it, warmer colors. So this is actually kind of reverse in this one. This has this pretty purple, almost a lavender, a little darker than a lavender, between lavender and grape here, but it has this cranberry back there. That's actually opposite of what they look like in nature usually, but I'm gonna let you decide which row you wanna do. I'm gonna put this back mountain in first. And I'm going for the realistic, obviously, but you can do whatever one you want. And It almost has a top like a volcano. See that? And I could add a little color to it just so it's not too light. But in general, that theory is a good one, where things that are farther away are lighter and bluer. That's why the sky is bluer. That's why oceans are bluer. That's why the faraway clouds look bluer. In general. So that's a faraway mountain. And then we've got some closer up ones. 1, 2, and then there's one that goes off the side there. So that one, I'm going to put right about here. Mine, everything's a little lower because I brought my sky down lower because I want to leave a little of that Broncos sunset in there. But if you want to make it truer, you can make these higher if you want. So there's this mountain back there. And again, I'm being very messy. I'm not even mixing my paints well, as you can see. And then this one goes in front of this one. And I'm going to cover the peaks with some white. So I'm not going to be too picky about the exact shape. And I'm using a big brush, but you can use a smaller brush if you want. All right. And I'm trying to let a little bit of that orange come through, just a little. You can see it in the snow. Okay. I'm going to mix a little more purple for this one. Now your shades of purple are going to be different than mine, for sure. Everybody's is going to be different. And here's the other thing is we have about 500 different paintings here at our studio, and each one is done with different colors of paint. We have about 50 different colors of paint, but we can't put 50 different colors in our kits, right? So this purple may not be exactly like the purple that the original artist used, and that's okay. Our painting is going to, just like Bob Ross's never looked the same twice, ours aren't going to look the same as the original, and that's okay. No one's ever going to see the original. They're going to see yours, and they're going to think you're a genius. But here's the thing, put these mountains on messy, okay? Now I'm noticing there's some orange in here that I did not bring down this low. So I'm going to have to think about what I'm going to do there. I could let this dry, and then I could stick some orange down in here. I think I'll do that. But maybe you brought your orange down a little lower. Maybe you have some orange there. But this is about the messiest mountain range I have ever painted. And I'm also painting it off to the side to remember that gallery wrap. Like I said, I don't think I've ever painted anything this loose. But before I'm tempted to fix it all and make it perfect, I'm going to stop myself. Sometimes I just have to slap my own hand and say, Nancy, step away from the canvas, please. I did notice this one's a little lower. I can fix that. All right. So I'm going to let this dry. I can come in here with a tiny brush and not touch that purple and just go underneath it, if I'm able, and just sneak in some more orange in here. If I have any little spots. I'm kind of playing with fire by doing that, but I don't know why there would be sunset down here. I really don't. But this painting, you know, again, it's impressionistic, so it doesn't always have to make perfect sense. I think it just breaks up the color a bit.
As soon as I finish this, I'm going to have to go in.
All right. I'm going to leave that alone. As messy and imperfect as it looks, I'm going to leave it alone. Whoops, except this one's a little higher than that one. Just make sure your mountains aren't all the same height. and that they're not perfect teepees. We don't want it to look like Charlie Brown's shirt, okay? All right, I'm going to step away before I fiddle with it too much. So if you have not gotten up from your seat, I want to ask you if you would go back, stand up, go back about 10 feet away from your painting and take a look at it 10 feet away. And the reason I'm suggesting that is that our paintings will always look different 10 feet away. That's the proper viewing distance. If you went to an art museum and looked at the master's art from this close, it would be terrible, as we said, it would look terrible. But I mean, the impressionistic stuff, but also the guard would probably tell you to back off if you were this close, right? They would get a little nervous because paintings aren't meant to be seen so close. They're meant to be seen 10 to 12, maybe 15 feet away. So get up and look at it from farther away, and you'll see that what looks really messy up close is actually pretty cool from the proper viewing distance.
Okay, mine looked worse.
No, really?
No, I did.
More wine. More wine.
More wine. That's always a good answer too. Well, we're going to fix that up here shortly, okay?
Yeah, same. That's worse.
We are our own worst critics, you know that? As women, we have to be kinder to ourselves.
That's true.
It's pretty dry. That's a clean, dry brush. I wouldn't do that with a wet brush with paint on it. Still a little bit of wet. Be sure to clean your brushes, okay? All right, so if you can hear me, when you originally chose this painting, I think Liz did, this, I don't know about you, but when I first looked at this painting, or when I looked at it after a while of not seeing it, I knew that there was snow here. But isn't it interesting when we look at it, this is not white. We know it's snow intellectually because there's snow on the trees, there's snow on the mountaintops. It's called, the painting is called Alpen Glow. So we know this is snow, but look at the color. It's the same color as the sky. Anyone have 50 imaginary points to anyone who can tell me why they painted it the same color as the sky?
Is it
Reflection?
Yeah, it's reflections from the sky. Absolutely. Isn't that cool?
Was it a lake?
Actually, I don't think it's supposed to be a lake. I think it's supposed to be a hill. And I'll tell you why I think so. If you want to make it a lake, you could. When you paint water, and we paint water all the time here, when you paint water, when it's from a distance, it always looks flat. Up close, you have waves. But if you were to paint big waves in it, you know, at this distance, it wouldn't look right. You would paint the water flat. This is all messy and bumpy. So to me, what that says is a hill with moguls. I do not ski, but just pulled that word out of thin air. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take, you can take your large brush or you can take a slightly smaller one, a medium one, whatever you like. I want to avoid anything wet here in my purple, but I'm going to put white on one side, just like I did the sky, and blue on the other. And I'm going to scribble in, I'm going to avoid that purple as best I can. Right up close next to it, I'm going to scribble in some of the same thing we did, the same treatment we did for the sky. Just scribble it in. And I'm going to leave little bits of that orange just kind of peeking through, because that's reflection from the sunset. And again, don't make it totally blended. We have to resist the urge to blend. Friends, don't let friends over blend, okay? Not when you're painting impressionistically. If we were painting a realistic painting, we'd want to blend, but not this style. Don't forget the sides. And I'm going to be messy by the orange because I want to leave some of that as just a reflection of the sun. Just little bits. Little bits. Now this hill is much steeper than that one, so I can go back in and fix that a bit. Oops, I did mess up my purple. Now I got to live with that. I can take a dry paper towel. I can wipe off, while it's wet, I can wipe off some of it and then paint over it again. But I'm going to let that dry a bit before I do it. Just be careful, your purple is probably still wet. Actually, it doesn't look bad anyway. Oh, no, I touched the yellow. If you make a mistake, like I just did, I touched the yellow. I have some yellow snow there. We all know what yellow snow is. If you make a mistake, let it dry, and then you can paint over it later. The white can be used like correction fluid for those of us who remember what that is. All right, so if this is streaky, your snowy area, it will be more convincing as snow, believe it or not. Streaky and messy, because those are those shadows. Maybe there's like bunny hops and I don't know, somebody made a snow angel. That's all those dips, all those darker blue areas create shadows, which are like recessed areas in the snow. And you'll notice that my blue is not the same as their blue. Again, that's going back to, we have about 10 different shades of blue here in the studio. And we only put one different color in the kits, but so far so good, it's working. Keep cleaning your brushes between steps, okay? I can't wait to travel again. I have a feeling all the tours and all the hotels are going to be booked up for 2 years. So I'm looking at this mountain and it's still very wet. This kind of looks like the one in Close Encounters, actually, that weird shape. But this one's dry. First one I did's dry. And this one's dry. And this one, the tippy top is dry. But this one's wet because I did that last. So I'm going to stay far away from the wet one. But since the one back there is dry, I can go ahead and scribble. And I literally can do this with my eyes closed. Scribble on some snow at the top. And it looks to me like in this painting, they put it on the top and then they favored the right side. Anyone know why they would favor one side of the mountains with snow and not the other side?
North side is.
Areas around the north-facing slope.
Sun melts it.
You guys are way too smart. I can't pull anything past this group. All right. So just shake your hand. Maybe even close your eyes just to make sure it's scribbly and not straight. And then favor the right side. I'm going to leave this one alone because it's so wet, remember. But notice how shaky I am. So that reminds me of this story. And maybe if you watch too many of my YouTube videos for painting, you've probably heard this one before. So dang, I hope nobody watches a lot of them. But anyway, we had this group in here. And we were told it was a fundraiser for a nonprofit. And we were told originally that it was for a sorority. And so we thought, okay, that's cool. You know, they'll be able to do a lot of this stuff. They're young. They're probably, you know, it wasn't too long ago they painted last. And they chose a piano keyboard to paint and with a rose on it. And this piano keyboard, if you can imagine painting a piano keyboard, had a ton of straight lines on it, just a ton. And normally straight lines are not a good idea. You don't want to do straight lines if you can help it. So we thought, well, you know, either they'll be drinking a lot because it's a sorority and they'll be fine with things not being perfect, or maybe, you know, it hasn't been long since they painted, they can handle it. So they all came in, and what they forgot to tell me was it was a sorority from 1950. And so a lot of the women that came in were in their 80s.
Oh, with shaky hands.
Like late 80s, yeah. And 90s, I don't know. Some of them were on oxygen, they had walkers, and which is great. We're glad to have them. It was wonderful. But they were really shaky and they were going to paint piano keyboards. And the other artist and I were just freaking out like, oh my gosh, this would be hard for anybody, let alone someone who has shaky hands. So the other artist and I painted 30 piano keyboards, and they drank and they had fun and they visited as they watched us paint 30 piano keyboards. So the next year we thought, okay, these people are never coming back. A lot of our fundraiser people come back every year. And we're like, we'll never see these people again. That was a disaster. Well, sure enough, the next year they wanted to do another one. And I said, you know, you might want to pick something a little easier. So they picked an impressionistic painting that had lots of mess in it, just like this one. And in this one, if you are slow and steady and you like things straight, it's a hard painting. But if you're naturally shaky, it's fantastic. So they did an impressionistic painting and they nailed it. It was amazing. So different strokes for different folks, right? Bottom line is be messy and shake your hand when you're painting that. I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step. And if yours is still too wet to do this, that's okay. You can just watch and wait. No problem. No problem. I'm looking at mine. My purple still has a little bit of shine to it, just a little bit, but very little. And my blue still has a lot of shine. So I'm going to avoid the blue. But I'm going to be putting in green. And green on top of blue is not a problem. So if there's any wet right at the top of my blue, not a problem. That'll still be fine. Green and purple will make something dark. So I want to avoid putting it over big globs of wet purple. So I'm going to, the way you make green is you just mix together blue and yellow. Pretty straightforward. The more blue you put in it, the more it will resemble evergreens. And as you know, our state tree is the Colorado blue spruce. And it's named that way because the green is so rich and evergreeny, it's practically blue. evergreeny. You know what I mean? So more blue for sure to make that evergreen shade. And then this green, super sloppy again. I'm basically just scribbling over the top of my land. Crazy. Notice how I'm moving my brush around because I don't want anything to be straight. I don't want a straight line there. So I'm slopping it on there by moving my brush back and forth so I get more like clumps and less a straight line. I don't want it to look like a racing stripe. I just lightened it up a bit. I'm going over it again because mine was a little bit dark, but, and that way if you have any, you know, some is light and some is dark, that's okay. Just looks like it's, you did that deliberately. And I'm not gonna fuss with it. I don't want it to be this perfectly measured band that's exactly a ½ inch wide or anything. I want to leave it sloppy like that.
Is that the sound of wine, Nancy?
This is the sound of my water.
Oh.
Actually, I went for a White Claw. I don't want to open a whole bottle of wine since it's only me drinking these days.
That's okay.
I noticed on the original they have more blue up at the top. I don't know why. Maybe that's because when things are farther away, they look bluer. But maybe it's just the way the messy style of this painting. I don't know. It's mixing with my green, so I'm going to cut that out. Not do that. I do switch my brushes a lot because that way I don't need to use quite so many napkins. We try to be environmentally conscious around here, and all this plastic in these kits is driving me crazy. Normally when we're open for in-person classes, we use, you know, fabric aprons and glass jars. Everything's pretty much reusable, metal easels. So this has all been a big learning curve for me. And I'm looking forward to going back to more sustainable use of supplies.
Oh, Finnegan.
All right, after you get that green on, we're going to use that green. I'm going to go with a small brush. And I have my neat palette here, obviously, right? No, it's messy, but that's okay. I'm going to go into the green. And now I'm going to paint on trees and basically use a dark shade of your green. I had a little mix with white, so I'm going to mix in some more blue so I get some darker. Come on there, blue. All right. And I'm going to sketch in a little trunk. And then I'm just going to literally with my brush just kind of sketch in little pine trees that are not too perfect or too neat. Believe me, these are really messy. Look at that. And if you ran out of blue, you could put in a teeny touch of black even, and that'll make that green a little deeper in color. But go easy, because black is a really powerful color, and it'll take over and take all your green up real fast. So be careful. But I'm just going to come in, and any little trees that I have, I want to make them so that they're all different sizes and that they all have a point. And some are going to be close to each other. Notice how I'm doing that. It's just a line and then little branches coming down. Nothing perfect. We want to avoid anything looking perfect on this. Make sure they have a point. And then I want them different sizes, and then some far apart from each other and some closer together. Trees tend to grow in clusters. Everyone's really quiet. You guys doing okay?
I'm not quite sure how to make a tree. Can you explain the technique of how to do a
You bet.
tree?
You bet. Let me just do it on a napkin for you. So just a trunk. And this is very, very, very loose. None of this, just remember that this is not going to look, keep it loose and messy, okay? Don't make these perfect or else it won't look like the rest of the painting. So just, there's a little trunk and then little scribble coming down. Little scribble coming down. But keep the point. Again, some close together, some farther apart, some short, some tall. None of them perfect looking, okay? If it's too perfect, it won't look like anything else we've painted so far.
Trees are hard. Can't do a tree.
Just make sure each one has a nice defined point, or else it'll look like a shrub. And that's okay. It just won't look like a pine tree. And not equidistant. I know that's you guys are math people, you'll probably know that word, but not spaced the same. Break them up.
My background is showing through the green so much. Is there anything I can do differently?
Yeah. So make sure that the green that you're mixing is plenty dark. Use a lot of blue and a teeny touch of black.
Add the black. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And if a little bit of a background shows through, that's okay too.
Well, it was a lot.
Yeah, if it's minty, you definitely want to add some more blue and black.
Well, it's a dark color. It's just, it doesn't matter. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. We'll do this big tree together after we get in these little trees. Try to keep the triangle shape so that they're wider at the top, at the bottom than they are at the top. Christmas tree shape. And branches all the way down. Don't leave a stub. In nature, in the mountains, trees don't have that stub at the bottom showing because the grass grows all the way up to the bottom branch. The reason you see a stub in City Park or is because they mow the bottom of they break up the branches to mow underneath the tree. So in the mountains, you're not going to see that stump. Just like you would with a Christmas tree, same thing. Has a stump because they broke off the bottom branches to cut down the tree. Put some straight lines in there just for really far away trees that don't have any detail on them. That tree's pretty big down there. Guess I'll make this one bigger. And then you can pull them off onto the side too. Keep that gallery wrap. So far, so good. I'm going to show you the tree trunk. It's going to be a tall tree, so I'm going to start at the top, very little pressure to make a thin trunk. This is a really dark green, it almost looks black, but I'm going to make my branches a little lighter in color. But I made a nice dark tree trunk. And it's going right down into the grassy area, because this one's up close. And notice that it's wider at the base than it is at the top. It gets thinner as it goes up. This painting, it's all the same green, but I wanted to make this one really stand out, so I added a little black to my green. But then I'm going to lighten it up for the branches a bit. All right, so when you're ready, I'm going to show you the branches on this tree. This one's very sparse looking. It's interesting. So I'm going to go into that green that I made before. So my branch, this is a little lighter than the trunk. This is more green that had black, more black in it. So I just want the branches to be a little lighter in color than the trunk. But I'm taking that green and I'm putting on both sides of a flat brush. And when I say a flat brush, all brushes have this ferrule and it's round on the handle. But then if it's crimped and this side is broader than that side, then it's a flat brush. It's flat because this is flat. So I'm taking a flat brush and I'm chiseling it on my plate back and forth so that I can get that thin line. And then I'm going to start up here at the tippy top of my tree. But I'm going to drop down about 1/2 of an inch. And the reason I do that is because the top of the tree trunk is growing, but you only have little nubs of foliage and you can't really see it. So I'm going to drop down a bit and I'm just using that flat brush. Just using that flat brush like that. And I'm tapping, tapping, tapping. I can flip it over when I run out of paint. I'm going back and forth. If you've ever rappelled, it's the same kind of motion. Many years ago and many pounds ago, I did rappel as a kid. So it's kind of that jumping down at the same time as you're going out. And then plenty of paint on that brush, lots of paint. If your paint's thin, put more paint on your brush. And I'm tapping, 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 tapping. And notice how I'm going out as I go down, because this tree is getting wider, because that's what evergreens do. And I'm not going to have everything be perfectly measured, right? Some of these branches might have a slightly different angle or be shorter, you know, even though it's that one was supposed to be longer. Make it imperfect. But in general, the shape is supposed to be like a Christmas tree, in general. In general. And I don't want it to be so perfect that there's the exact same number on each side and they're measured, maybe you stick an extra branch in on one side that's not on the other. You want it to look more natural. Maybe a bear came in and broke a branch on that part. Be careful on these mountaintops. If they're still wet, you might have to wait until they're dry and go over them again. But remember what I said about pine trees? The branches are going to go all the way down. There's not going to be a stub because these are natural. No stubs. Now, this, you can really see the trunk. It's really not my style, but that's how they did it. So you can leave the trunk like that, or you can tap in a little more fullness over the trunk area. That is my preference. It looks a little more natural, I think. Just tapping in a little more fullness over the center of the tree, and that paints the branches that are sticking out. I also messed up my snow-capped peaks, but I'll tap over those. So if you know, it's your call. If you want a really skinny tree with sparse branches, go for it. If you want it to look a little more natural, tap over the trunk a bit to kind of hide that trunk. My tree looks a little more realistic. Oops. Oh well. Now I'm going to let all this dry, and then we're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to add some snow highlights to our trees, and then we'll sign it. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our studio. For those of you who haven't been here before, we're at I-25 in Hampden. Normally, when it's not pandemic time, we have classes every single day of the year, every single day of the week and of the year, and then on the weekends, several on Saturdays and Sundays. Unfortunately, now we can't have anyone in the studio for classes, but we're doing these virtual classes. In addition to the Canvas classes, we also do face mask painting. And so this one is tie-dyed. And then I have some, so there's kits that you can buy that have face masks in them and paints. And so this one is, somebody painted it, actually I painted this one, according to our instructions on our YouTube channel. There are lots of free classes on YouTube. And this, so this is a Bronco sunset with pine trees, and then fall colors. And then this one's tie-dyed. And basically with tie-dyed, we just water down the paint, let it absorb into the face mask and let it dry. And then we put it in the washing machine alone, of course. And it softens after it's washed. This one's a beach scene. And same thing, if you wash these, they get softer. And just doodling. So that's one kind of class that we sell as a kit. All of our kits are $20 each. 20 per kit. And then this is a different kind of kit that we have, and these are ornaments. And so we just pour the paint into the ornament. You take off the cap, and then you pour the paint in and you slosh it around. And so the kits have ornaments in them as well as paints and the instructions. We threw a little glitter in that one. So yeah, pretty fun. So 3 different kinds of painting kits that we sell for 3 different kinds of classes. And all of the classes on our YouTube channel are completely free. So if you stop by I-25 in Hampden, we're here in the afternoons, 3 to 6 at least, some days 12 to 6. There's a calendar, and then yeah, you can pick up a painting kit for $20 and keep painting with us. We'd love to have you keep painting with us.
Face
love the
mask
mask
painting is a
idea.
cute idea. That's fun.
Thanks. So yeah, we're selling a ton of the ornament kits right now. I can't keep them in stock, actually. So I'm going to show you how to put highlights on these little baby trees. I'm basically just going to take the smallest brush I have, the smallest little round brush. Now, a lot of my painting is still wet. This tree is still wet, so I have to be careful. On the dry ones, on the ones that are dry, I'm just going to tap on a little bit of snow on the top of each clump of branches. Why on the top? Well, that's where the snow would fall, right? And stick and not melt. And so just on the top of little branches. With your smallest brush. I don't want to cover the whole tree in snow, obviously, but just where it would make sense that snow would fall from the top as it snowed down from the sky. I'm just going to do that. And then you can also put some on the ground a little, but messy, sporadic. I'm not going to cover all of my grass because, as you know, when it snows, it doesn't always cover everything in full, and grasses can stick up through it, dirt sticks up through it, tree trunks stick up through it. So there is snow, but it's sporadic in there. All right, feel free to unmute while you add some little snow decorations. If you put them on in the amount that you would normally put on icicles on your Christmas tree, that's about right.
Do they do that anymore?
Yeah, I don't know.
I missed
I don't know if
that.
people do that. But maybe when we were kids, right?
I remember it.
They're just highlights. That's the point. I'm not covering the tree. I'm still letting the branches, you know, show. I'm just highlighting them with little bits of snow. And trying not to be too meticulous about it.
And not loosey goosey.
It's still loose for sure. So is your group, do all of you work together, or is it's a professional organization, right?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, professional association. So I think a couple people work together, but we mostly all work in different places. And,
Awesome.
yeah.
I just want to also show you that I'm putting snow on the highlights of the parts of the tree that are dry. If it's wet, I'm going to stay far away and leave it alone until it's dry. But it's the same thing that we're doing down below, putting it on the tops of the branches in kind of a sporadic, almost random fashion, but just on the tops, not underneath, because snow would fall on the tops of the branches and stick there. But when I get to a wet spot, I'm going to leave it alone, let it dry, come back. And of course, some of those branches would be in front of the trunk. I'm sorry to interrupt about, please feel free to keep busy. So I just want to tell you that was the last of my instruction. We are officially done with this painting. And I just want to tell you, you can take a tiny brush, put it in whatever color paint you like, and then sign your painting down in the bottom right-hand corner so that when it is in the Louvre or the d'Orsay, I'll recognize it and say, hey, I know that lady.